When people think about the most powerful battleships ever built, the Iowa class is usually one of the first names that comes to mind. Now, these enormous American warships were almost 887 feet long, could reach speeds of around 33 knots, and carried 9 gigantic 16-inch guns that could fire shells weighing roughly 2,700 pounds at targets nearly 24 miles away. The sheer destructive power of these weapons is difficult to imagine. A single salvo from all 3 turrets sent thousands of kilograms of steel and explosives towards an enemy ship. And few warships in history could survive a direct hit from multiple Iowa-class guns. But despite all this impressive engineering, there is one question that makes the design particularly interesting. Why did the United States Navy choose 16-inch guns instead of larger 18-inch guns? After all, bigger guns meant bigger shells, greater explosive power, and potentially greater armor penetration. Japan had already demonstrated this philosophy with the Yamato class, whose 9 18.1-inch guns were the largest naval artillery weapons ever mounted on an operational battleship. So if the United States were capable of building enormous battleships, why didn't it simply build an American battleship with 18-inch guns and surpass the Japanese? The answer comes down to 10 major reasons, and each one reveals something important about how the Iowa class was designed. The first and most obvious reason is that the United States Navy already had an extremely powerful weapon in the 16-inch 50 caliber Mark VII. Each Iowa-class battleship carried 9 of these guns, arranged in 3 triple turrets, and each gun could fire an armor-piercing shell weighing approximately 2,700 pounds or about 1,225 kilograms to ranges approaching 24 miles. Now, these shells were specifically designed to penetrate the heavy armor of enemy battleships before exploding inside the target. So while an 18-inch gun would certainly have been more powerful, the Navy already had a weapon that could deliver devastating firepower against virtually any armored warship it was expected to encounter. Moving from 16 inches to 18 inches sounds like a relatively small increase, but on a battleship it would have created a much bigger problem. The larger gun would require a heavier barrel, a larger turret, stronger supporting structures, larger ammunition handling machinery, and bigger magazines. The shells themselves would also be considerably heavier and bulkier. Since battleship designers had to work within strict weight limits, all of this additional weight would have had to come from somewhere. The Navy could either make the entire ship larger or sacrifice something else, such as armor, ammunition capacity, or speed. Number 3, the Iowas were designed around speed. This was one of the most important reasons for staying with 16-inch guns. The Iowa class were specifically designed as a fast battleship, capable of reaching approximately 33 knots. The Navy wanted these ships to operate alongside fast aircraft carriers, which meant they simply couldn't become enormous, slow-moving gun platforms. An 18-inch main battery would have increased the weight of turrets, ammunition, and supporting structures, potentially making it much harder to maintain the Iowa's impressive speed. The Navy therefore considered the combination of heavy guns and high speed more valuable than simply having the largest possible caliber. Number 4, the bigger guns would have created a chain reaction in the ship's design. The problem with an 18-inch gun wasn't limited to the gun itself. Once the main battery became heavier, almost everything supporting it would have to become stronger as well. The turrets would become larger, the barbets would have to support more weight, the ammunition elevators would have to handle heavier shells, and the hull would need to accommodate the additional machinery and structural reinforcement. That additional weight could then require more powerful propulsion machinery, which would itself consume more space and weight. In other words, increasing the gun caliber could trigger a chain reaction that affected the entire battleship. International naval treaties also played an important role. The Washington Naval Treaty of 1922 established a maximum battleship gun caliber of 16 inches. This meant that American battleship development was heavily influenced by the 16-inch standard. Although Japan eventually moved beyond this limitation and built the Yamato class, which is 18.1-inch guns, the United States had already spent developing battleships and naval artillery around the 16-inch limit. Even when treaty restrictions began to break down, the 16-inch caliber had already become deeply established in American battleship design. America also had considerable experience with 16-inch naval artillery. The North Carolina and South Dakota classes had already been associated with 16-inch weapons, giving American engineers experience with manufacturing ammunition, fire control, and logistics for this caliber. The Iowa class's Mark VII was a highly advanced development rather than a completely new concept. Moving to an 18-inch weapon would have required a new gun, new ammunition, new loading systems, and new supporting infrastructure. The Navy therefore had to ask whether the additional destructive power was worth abandoning a mature and proven 16-inch systems. Number 7. An 18-inch shell would have reduced ammunition capacity. Another problem was ammunition. Battleships needed to carry large quantities of shells because a naval engagement could last for hours, and their guns could also be used for prolonged shore bombardment. If the shells become significantly larger and heavier, the ship would have had to choose between carrying fewer rounds or increasing the size of its magazines. Carrying fewer shells would have reduced combat endurance, while increasing magazine capacity would add even more weight and consume valuable internal space. The 16-inch shell was already enormous, so the Navy could achieve a better balance between destructive power and ammunition capacity by keeping the caliber at 16 inches. Number 8. The fire control technology was just as important as gun size. A battleship's effectiveness wasn't determined simply by the diameter of its guns. At extreme ranges, the ability to detect, track, and accurately hit an enemy was just as important. The Iowa class benefited from sophisticated fire control engagement, range-finding systems, and radar technology that allowed its 16-inch guns to engage targets at very long distances. A slightly larger shell would not provide much benefit if the ship couldn't accurately place that shell on the target. The United States therefore focused not only on the size of the weapon, but also improving the entire system surrounding it. The Japanese Yamato class is often brought up when discussing this question because it carried 9 enormous 18.1-inch guns, but Yamato and Iowa were designed around somewhat different priorities. Yamato emphasized enormous size, extreme armor protection, and maximum gun power, while Iowa emphasized a balance between firepower, protection, and speed. Neither approach was simply better in every situation. They represented different solutions to the same fundamental problem: how do you create a battleship powerful enough to dominate an enemy while still keeping its size and capabilities within practical limits? At number 10, the nature of naval warfare was changing. Finally, there was a much bigger development taking place at the same time: the rise of air power. By beginning of World War II, aircraft carriers were transforming naval warfare. Aircraft could attack from distances far beyond the range of battleship guns, while submarines were also becoming increasingly important. This meant that the Navy had to think carefully about how much additional value it would eventually receive from making battleship guns even larger. The Iowa class still needed enormous guns, but there was increasingly less justification for sacrificing speed and flexibility simply to gain another 2 inches of caliber. When all of these factors are put together, the decision becomes much easier to understand. The Iowa class didn't use 16-inch guns because the United States was incapable of building 18-inch guns. It used them because 16 inches offered an extremely effective balance between firepower, weight, ammunition capacity, armor, speed, and engineering practicality. With this, we are signing off for today, but we'll see you again in our next video. So until then, stay tuned. Bye.